Um, yeah, I mean, I didn't. I was curious. Like, have you had any thoughts on the book since last time we met, or like anything else come up you wanted to discuss at this point, or?
Because I've been a good person and I know this time. So what did I remember looking at some stuff between chapters 11 and 12.
Mhm.
Um, what was it? There was something very specific that I really liked. So I thought it was interesting when I was reading the book about
Mhm.
how Sharina was talking with Ricky One Leg. This is on page 146. And
Mhm.
he was telling them how her and Quentin,
Mhm.
how his daughter, they had just bought his daughter a new computer for
Right.
school, I believe. And they raised the rent because they're like, oh, you have enough money for a computer, you have enough money for rent
Mm.
or for more rent or whatever. And I was just like, that's not how it works. But I just think like for that particularly stood out for me because I felt like they can't do anything nice for themselves or like something that they actually need without
Mhm.
trying to hide it from somebody who would take advantage of that mm, I guess yeah, situation
Mhm.
in the fact that they had enough money for like maybe that one instance to get her something that she needed to do well in school.
Mhm.
So I just thought that was really interesting and kind of backwards because I'm sure that based on like the stories that have been told,
Mhm.
I'm sure that took a lot of effort. And now here
Right.
they are like trying to celebrate something that they felt was a positive, and she's turned around and made it like something very negative and hard.
Mhm.
So I don't that was just something that really stood out to me because these people work hard for their money, and just because they could afford that one thing didn't mean that they could didn't mean that going up on rent was except like something that they could do.
Mhm.
So
Right.
I don't know what you thought about that, if you remember reading that or anything like that.
Yeah, I do actually. I remember. I was looking through my notes before our meeting today, and like, I was thinking about that because I remember writing it down. About how like Sharina and Quentin were like complaining about their tenants spending their money irresponsibly or whatever, and I was like, you literally just came back from a trip from Jamaica,
Right.
and like your husband's having to hide his jewelry because he doesn't want to like because he's like people have called him out on that before. I'm like,
Mhm.
is this not a double standard? But I mean, like it's a little different, but yeah, I agree. Like it's weird how the tenants are so easily exploited in that regard.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, and I was also thinking about it too because it's like you know how do I say this? Like, I don't know if buying a computer is necessarily irresponsible. You know what I mean? Like you were just saying, like it's for his daughter to like help with school or whatnot. So yeah.
Well, it wasn't like a frivolous, like, oh, let's, like they did, like, let's go on vacation. I
Hmm.
mean, not that they even had money for that, but I mean, they could have used that money and like they could have saved it, but they
Hmm.
chose to help better their daughter's education. I don't feel that looking at that from a landlord perspective, at least for me, I wouldn't feel like that's some frivolous expense that,
Hmm.
oh, like something that's you're trying to get back at me at or anything like that. So I just didn't, I felt like they felt like they wanted to exert power over
Hmm.
the situation. And I just didn't feel like that was right. I was like, geez, one thing nice.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's. I mean, like thinking along similar lines of what else was happening in that chapter. Because I mean, they talk a lot in that chapter about like, I think they spent a lot of time with the people who like clean up the movers that like do a lot of the evictions for the landlords and whatnot. Um, and there it was interesting. They were talking about like sometimes like even though these tenants like were notified they were being evicted, they're like surprised when the actual movers come and whatnot. And that was pretty shocking. But it made me think about some of the other themes in the chapter, like specifically like how like Sharina and Quentin are talking about like people their tenants spending their money irresponsibly or whatever. It's like, well, I mean, not again, not to say that like her tenant buying the computer is irresponsible. I mean, like I thinking more like related to um people being surprised by the movers or whatnot. It's like in situations where like there is such they're routinely exposed to like poverty and like routine not and like routinely in precarious situations, like it makes planning for the future kind of difficult, you know what I'm saying, like
Mhm.
so I can kind of see why for some people it'd be hard to like realize that like hard to plan for the eviction or whatnot. So um again, it's like I feel like a lot of what our conversations boil down to in these discussions is like how it's systemic or like
Right.
just cyclical issues, I should say.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what your thoughts were on that, but
I thought it was interesting that they were surprised, seeing as it was supposed to be like a whole documented process.
hmm
I can understand them informing them with like the paper and things like that and assuming that they know. But I feel like, even though I know it would be hard to do, but a face to face conversation about this is when you're being evicted, this is the day, this is the
mm,
time that they'll be here, and having that face to face conversation. So, and having them maybe like sign off on something just to be like, we've told
hmm
you ahead of time and that's it. But putting something like on a door, like it could come off, like who knows?
mm,
And then on top of that, if I mean, what if they really weren't notified? Like, and they knew they were being evicted, but if you don't like, it's like, oh yeah, you're gonna have a test this semester, but they didn't give you the date.
right.
So at some point, you're gonna be like, okay, well, maybe that's not happening. Like,
hmm
and then the week, a week, the week of, they're like, oh, so the test is tomorrow, and you're looking at them like, well, that doesn't give me time to prepare. Like that's
hmm
kind of like a thrown off thing. And so, not to like compare it to something so like frivolous, but it's kind of like that same concept. It's just people need time to prepare, not only like with their space, but like
hmm
mentally. They need to figure out where they're going
hmm
and things like that. And to not have a process, um, like a concrete process to make sure that not only tenants know, but like everyone involved knows the day and time when this will be happening. And even if it gets moved, that they'll be updated is just kind of like, I don't want to say inhumane, but very like stress inducing.
hmm
Or I can't, there's a word I'm thinking of, and stress inducing is the best way I can
hmm
describe it without using the word I'm trying to think of. So,
hmm Gotcha.
so yeah, yeah, that was, it was hard for me to believe that they showed up saying like, oh, you were notified, and them always being like, oh, I didn't know it was today. Like, and in the book, they talk about how like they look completely shocked and
mm
things like that. And I'm like, yeah, you can act that way, but after a while, like, how many people is it going to take for people to look like shocked and amazed and realize like maybe the process that you're using isn't the best?
hmm
I mean, they can be shocked and amazed, but if you have paperwork saying like you knew when we were coming, it's a little less like, I don't know, it's just like not as mean. Because if they don't know for sure, it's just kind of like leaving people out in a lurch. And again, not right.
yeah. Yeah, it's just a system rife for exploitation and um indifference in this case. But let me ask you, like, because you said something earlier about how, like, if the landlord had maybe had a conversation with the tenants, um, that might be a little different, or like that would be better. Do you think that like part of the issue might be like the distance between the landlord and the tenants? Is that kind of what you're getting at? I'm curious, like your thoughts on that.
So what I'm getting at is there's a disconnect between the just like the people who are doing the eviction, like the police officer
Mm,
and nurse, the landlord and the tenant. So I mean, the police officer and the government and all that, they could have talked to the landlord and been like, this is the time and day. And between all three of them, the tenant out of all that could have just gotten information about like, you're going to be evicted. While they have a time and day, the tenant is the one who needs to move out.
mm,
So you can like by having these concrete like this is when it's going to happen discussions, I feel like could alleviate very minute stress, like very little stress on the tenant.
mm,
So being evicted is obviously very stressful. At least they will have a concrete day and time, because if that communication isn't happening, then it's just like a toss up, and they're just like, maybe they're just hoping that they don't show up, or maybe who knows, it could be just like the landlord and like the government at some point in time, like the police station or whatever, just trying to be like, I don't want to say like trying to be mean, but like maybe it's just the landlord who like
mm,
knows the day and time, and like because they don't like their tenant, they don't tell them the day and time, they just say you're being evicted, and then the cop and the moving people show up at a random day. So I just think that there needs to be, if possible, like some sort of documentation
mm,
instead of like, oh, like note on the door, you're being evicted in a week.
mm.
So something more concrete.
Right. Yeah. So like more of a paper trail, for lack of a better term. So
Yeah. Because I mean, if they, I mean, I find it hard that someone being evicted can dispute it that day and at that time.
mm,
But having that documentation, at least it's like, I don't know, it's like a, it protects the landlord, yeah, but it also kind of like, eviction is like very real. So like I don't want to say it makes it real for the tenant, but it's just like there's a, you know, that window, like there's a window and you know that window.
yeah. I mean, like sometimes I wonder, like even if they like in with some of these tenants, like even if they had that window, like this is jumping ahead a little bit, but even then, like with that, like some of them, like I wonder, like if some of them would have found like housing anyway, if that makes sense. Just because like thinking about what happens in um the next chapter with Lorraine, I think her name is the woman, one of the women in the trailer park. Like she actually does have some notice when she's getting evicted. Like she's aware that like what's his face? I can never remember his name. The dude who like runs the trailer park. What's his name?
Oh, Toby? Tobin?
Is that the landlord? Yeah, Tobin. Like, like he like is going to like he like makes it known that he's gonna evict Lorraine because she's routinely behind on her rent. And it sounds like, you know, in her case, like she did reach out to a few like services to try to get help, but like a lot of them were like she didn't qualify for, like for she didn't have dependent children, for example, or she didn't have um like a specific like life altering event that would qualify for her for aid. So like I in my head I'm kind of like, yeah, I mean, obviously it would be preferable to have like more notice, but like in some of these cases I wonder like would that actually make a difference? I'm not saying I'm defending like the landlords or the system for
Right.
operating the way it does. I'm just saying like there are other issues in the system as well, which kind of like precludes the helpfulness of like advance notice, if that makes sense. So
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I just think having like a process would be better, but I mean, it doesn't negate the fact that they still need to find another place to live,
yeah.
and not being able to find something in a that span of time can be hard, because I know some evictions happen like within the week.
Hmm.
And so, which I think is cruel and unusual, but it's fine. That's the way they do it. It's cool. Um, And I understand like it's a business, like you have to get people out in order to get people in who will actually pay rent. But
Hmm.
um I just think that this whole like I think there needs to be a way to kind of make sure that those who are getting evicted, like there's a way, they have some place to go because that
Mm,
just increases the homelessness and things like that in the neighborhood and in society, and that's just not good public health.
yeah.
Not good public health by not taking care of the public. So,
Hmm.
um, yeah, I mean, yeah, so I think there should be something that they can figure out, like some sort of way to kind of like help people that have been evicted. Like there's no like this all the services have been denied, so they're getting it, like it's happening.
Hmm.
But they need to figure out a place to go. And I know a lot of shelters and stuff like that can be full, especially if they get evicted in like winter times and things like that. So yeah, I think that trying to find the place to live is also kind of an important aspect to look at because I mean, who knows where they're going and then they have to like put all their stuff out on the curb. Like it's
Mm,
already probably very embarrassing for them on top of the stress. So
hmm.
at least having a place to go to, even if you can only take so many things,
Hmm.
is still better than nothing.
Yeah, and I mean, like the few options a lot of these folks have, it sounds like they're either not available or just not good. They're just not viable.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's interesting because like they talk about this late. The author talks about this later. I think it's chapter like 12 or something. Like so, fast forwarding a little bit, when Arlene is like right before she's going to be evicted, and Sharina is showing her apartment while she's still living there, mind you.
Yeah,
Which I was like, wow, awkward. Like,
wow, she is bold. Like, okay.
I feel so I wouldn't say I feel ambivalent. Like Sharina's one of those people who it's like, well, I don't want to say one of those people, but like she's just, like I. There are things about her that are kind of there are things about her I'm just kind of like that's so messed up.
Right.
Like it's almost like I don't know how to explain it. It's like it's just so incredibly brash and the brazen. It's like I kind of love it just because it's awful, but like not real. I don't know if I'm making
It's a,
sense, but
I mean, you probably love it because like at least she's upfront with how she is.
I mean, I wouldn't say I love it, but like, yeah, there's a certain. I
It's
think
like,
that I'm like using the wrong terms, but I like to a certain degree. Like, I I admire her honesty at least. Like, at least she's up, like you just said. Like, at least she's upfront about how awful she is. So, um,
yeah,
yeah. But
that
anyway, yeah.
yeah, that threw me off. I was like, did I just read this correctly? Like showing the house while she's living in the house. Like she could have at least given her a heads up, like I'm bringing a future possible tenant.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't know if it's like even legal to be like, you need to not be in there while I'm showing the apartment, but I mean, she could have asked.
Yeah, I don't honestly know what the laws are in Baltimore or Detroit where this takes place. I think in Rhode Island where I live, like you can't do like I'm not sure. I think you can do that actually. Like I think you can like technically show an apartment. The landlord can show an apartment whenever they want. I think. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not really sure on that, but I just thought it was weird. I just thought it was weird like it's not just that Arlene's moving out. She's being evicted by the person showing the
Right.
apart and like the
Oh,
per
well, I'm done here, living here. I'm gonna move to like I'm moving somewhere else, like
yeah.
of my own free will. Like now I think it's like it almost felt like she was like telling her like just FYI, this is really happening, like you need to be out.
Right,
I
yeah.
feel like she could have just said that to her instead of showing up with a person who will be moving into her
Yeah. But
house.
like what got even like crazier for me is like, oh, not only does like was that happening, but like the person who was viewing the apartment knew that's what was happening, or like found out rather what that was happening, and then offered to let Arlene and her kids stay. I was like,
Mhm.
what? I found that
Yeah, I was like, that's nice.
I guess.
Strangers.
I mean, but that's what the other like my like I was alluding to earlier. Like the author kind of elaborates how like people like the social poverty network, the social
Mhm.
network like within poverty. It's like it sounds like, you know, through necessity, like these, I think they're called disposable ties, he calls them in the book.
That's the whole chapter. That's what the whole chapter.
Yeah,
Yep.
right. It's like, you know, they people who are impoverished in this context, like they try to help each other out, like, you know, through necessity. Like it's like they try to, yeah, lean on each other. Yeah. But I think the author also implies that like because Crystal, the woman moving in, didn't have any furniture, like she may
Yeah,
have offered to let Arlene and her kids stay because they had furniture. So yeah.
she had everything she needed. So she was like, well, let's not let them leave too soon because the money that I end up like trying to save, I could save the money on like furniture that they already have.
Right.
And so I could save that money and then I guess by the time they move out, I'll have enough money to buy all this stuff or they'll give it to me because they're like being evicted, obviously. Well, I guess at this point, are they being evicted or
Well, yeah, technically they are being
so,
evicted, but they're not actually moving. Yeah.
so once she moved in, was the eviction kind of like nullified?
I don't think so because I think like legally they were still evicted. Like legally they were not the tenants of the apartment anymore. They, I guess, just were had an informal arrangement with Sharina where it's like, well, you can stay here, but like you'd be staying here as Crystal, the new tenant's guests or something. I don't know. Like,
Yeah, so and I think this is still in chapter 12, but they were
mhm,
like getting in a lot of arguments because she was so young. She was actually closer to her children to I forget I'm not good with names. She was
me
closer to
neither.
children's age rather than
Yeah.
the mother's age. So it was just surprising because the kids and Crystal were getting into arguments.
Hmm.
And then the mom would have to be like, okay, well, trying to like trying to like not be too much in the middle of it because she didn't want to anger Crystal and then get kicked out, but she
Hmm.
didn't want to make her children feel like she didn't love them or like that they were because some like maybe they weren't in the wrong, but
Hmm.
she had to like finagle her way around her
Yeah.
situation to make sure she still had a place to live. So, but yeah, they were like getting locked out of the house, or like she was threatening to lock the kids out of the house. I was like, dang, it's cold outside.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's kind yeah, it's just crazy because like, yeah, I mean, because like, because of it's, I don't know, it's the sort of thing where like, I think as I was reading that chapter, I was like, even like during that part where like she's like, where Crystal was like, Arlene could stay with her or whatever, I was like, in my head, I was like, well, that's good, but like, something tells me this is gonna end badly. I was kind of like, oh no, like nothing good can happen. Like, and it's like that's why reading this book can be very challenging sometimes. Where it's like, as everything that happens to these characters that's even a little bit positive, you just know something awful is gonna happen immediately.
Right.
Again, I'm saying characters again. These aren't characters; they're people.
Mhm.
Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's just,
And
I
it's
some
like,
yeah.
yeah, it's like almost like one good thing happens and then something like five times worse happens to them, like
Right,
within a week. And it's just like you're trying to like cheer them on and you just know something is going to happen around the corner. So,
right.
and to live like that, that's again very stressful.
Yeah, no, understandable. Like, so I mean, I'm not. I mean, like, we will like. I mean, later on in the book, like, the Crystal and Arlene's relationship will continue to change and develop as the book progresses. But like, yeah, even within the first chapter, like within their first meeting, or not meeting, within the first shortly after like meeting, like, there's already issues and yeah. Um, and I mean, the public health aspect of that is like, I mean, part of that it sounds like is at least partially due to like health disparities that are continuing not being addressed. Like, for example, Crystal suffers from bipolar disorder, which is why she's on SSI in the first place. Which is in, I think it's implied. I don't, let me see. Um, like the author goes into like some of her background a little bit, like like about her parents' issues, like substance use and whatnot, like how she was in
Mhm.
foster care for a long time. Yeah, I think it's implied that some of her mental health issues are kind of resultant of those problems, which again, like health disparities. So
Mhm.
yeah. So it's just a lot going on. But
Yeah.
yeah, and I mean, and I'm just looking at um some of what was in chapter 12 as well.
I think at
Yeah.
some point I have a note here
Hmm.
as so they, I think if I'm reading my note correctly, Arlene was in charge of like buying all the food and stuff, and it was
Hmm.
99. It says dollar meat.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I read that as 99 cents. I don't know why I read that as 99 cents. Um, but I mean, I think Arlene was like the one cooking for them and picking
Hmm.
up groceries and things like that. So I can't remember this, but was Crystal covering the entire rent?
I think so. I do. I remember that part in the book where like, I think part of what happened was so Crystal and Arlene's son Jory like got into a really big fight,
Mhm.
and Arlene came back, and she like I think part of it was like she thought part of why Crystal was upset because she was hungry.
Mm.
Um, because yeah, I think Arlene was the one who was actually buying the groceries and like cooking the food once. So she like used her food stamp. So Arlene used her food stamps like buy a lot of like meat and chips and soda and stuff, and then like when she brought that back home, like Crystal was like not decided not to take them out, and I think the author posits or like suggests that when that was wise because like she just brought food home. So yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, it looks like um let's see. Yeah, I think you're right. I think Arlene, I'm sorry, Crystal was the one who's responsible for the rent in that case. So
So I guess that was like an agreement that they had.
right.
Mm, that's chapter 13. Going too far. Oh, so there was one thing in chapter 11.
Hmm.
I wrote a note where some landlords they didn't want to use tenants who were with or who had rent assistant programs
Right. Yeah.
um, because they didn't want to deal with their properties being inspected.
Hmm.
And I was like, you guys are having so many problems with people not paying rent, and this can guarantee you that the rent will get paid and stuff.
Yeah.
And you're choosing not to do it because you don't want to have your building up to code.
Yeah. I mean, Arlene seems to like kind of work. I think Arlene figures out how to use that to her advantage because she just so my understanding of the way like the vouchers work was like the state would pay for like a certain percentage of the rent,
Mhm.
not the entire thing, but like I think over
Yeah.
50%. I forgot the specific number. Um, so because of and like the so because of that, like a landlord could technically charge above the market value for the apartment.
Hmm.
So I think Arlene figured out how to make it work for her, but I think the issue is more just profit. That is like they'd have to actually upkeep their buildings,
Right.
so they'll eat into their profits. Hence,
Yeah.
they don't want their inspectors. So which
Yeah.
is like, oh, which yeah, because I mean, this is exactly what we were talking about in previous discussions. Like, it's a matter of power. Like, the only power tenants really have is rent, and if they're too poor to really pay their rent or pay it consistently, then the landlords don't have to necessarily upkeep the buildings or like,
Mhm.
yeah. Whereas in a situation like the tenants who normally wouldn't be able to pay rent and therefore wouldn't have any power or any leverage like are kind of backed to a certain degree by the state, so they have a little more bargaining power here.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's messed up.
Yeah.
um,
Like, so I mean, like the fact that they just don't want to make sure that their building is livable. Like,
Mm.
but they wouldn't want to live in a building like that.
No, yeah, I'm sure they wouldn't. So,
Um, I mean, just because they don't have like a bunch of money doesn't mean they should be living in like these horrible buildings that
mhm.
wouldn't pass code if someone came by and was like, "We're gonna look at this today." So
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, the interesting thing to me, or like one of the interesting kind of thoughts I had in our discussion just now is like maybe part of the way change could be affected in the future is framing housing issues as a public health issue. Um, that is, like we know that housing and unstable housing rather is associated with all these issues like mental health, like like um, how do I say like substance use issues or other health problems. Like
Mhm.
um, maybe that could be a way to reframe the argument to like try to bolster protections for tenants. I don't know. It's just a thought. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but
Yeah, because I mean, because so much is dependent upon someone having a roof over their head,
mhm,
um, whether it be their mental health and or just their physical health, like
mhm,
it's just very dependent upon that. And having a population that is both physically and mentally well
mhm,
to the best of their ability, I think is it's a like people I guess when looking at it in like a profit kind of way or like
mhm,
a expenditure economic kind of way,
mhm,
it's like the better you take care of the people like living there, the more likely they won't have these like issues dealing that relate back to the housing.
mhm,
And so less money will be spent from the government feeding into these programs because people won't need them because they've been properly taken care of and things like that. So I think it's just sometimes it's like again a cyclic thing where it's like they don't want to put money into this program, but if they don't put money into this program, people lose housing. If people lose housing, then they need this, and that, and then more money will have to be put into that as well. And I think if they just put more money into trying to make sure people had housing,
mhm,
less money would be spent on the after effects of not having housing.
mm.
So
Yeah. So do you think a case could be made for like potential savings of those kinds of investments? Like, doing like a cost benefit analysis of like, okay, you're spending X number of money on like public services around these issues, but if you spent X number of dollars on like affordable housing, like you'd save this much money. I don't know, like if that's an idea or yeah.
yeah, I think there should definitely be some sort of like cost benefit analysis and to see like what exactly is happening when it comes to that because
Mhm,
I can guarantee you like they're going to find that the costs like currently are like outweighing the benefits. So like putting more into the benefits of everything like it's going to be great. I think did I say that correctly? I know what cost benefit is. I don't know if I'm like saying it correctly. But what I'm saying is like making sure that these people are benefiting from like the housing and things like that, the cost will just go down. I think it'd be a good cost benefit analysis, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's worth thinking about. Like, I honestly don't know how other countries handle affordable housing. That
Mhm.
might be that might be something interesting to think about or like to research on our own for our next discussion or whatnot. So,
Yeah. Yeah, because I have absolutely no idea how that works in some countries.
I mean, I barely understand how it works in this country. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Hmm.
Because I thought about this, like actually, like earlier today when I was like, we're like looking at my notes before a discussion, I was like, because my landlord is actually selling the building I'm living in, and I actually have a
Oh.
lot of yeah, I'm actually have a lot of concerns about that because I actually have a great relationship with my landlord. She's great,
Mhm.
but now like the person who's buying it, I don't know who this person is really,
Mhm.
like, and also like because I live in a college town, like there are a lot of like it's kind of funny. There are a lot of like landlords or like like real estate companies that have like a bunch of buildings that students live in, like mine, and it's like they're pretty terrible because
Yeah.
like it's obviously not the same as like what we're talking about here in this book, but
Right.
like they're driven obviously by profit, and like part of that profit is not really maintaining their buildings, and like because they have a high turnover rate, like they don't have to upkeep it as much. So I don't know, I don't think, I hope that's not going to happen in my building, but yeah. So
Yeah, I mean that the relationship you have with your landlord and how you brought that up, it just reminds me of the situation with the trailer park and how
hmm
Tobin got, I don't know if he, I can't remember if he got rid of them or if they had to, or if they just had to leave.
hmm
The two people that worked there with him and the community knew them and they felt
hmm
comfortable talking
yeah.
about their issues, and they felt like they were being heard. And then all of a sudden this new college grad comes in and all these people who have probably never been in their situation come in, and they don't know how that's gonna go over, and
hmm
and it seems like they are nervous, not seems like they're nervous because like they're not gonna have anyone to like give them some leeway when they really need it,
mm
or like have some sort of understanding with them. There's no rapport between them and the new people, and frankly like the new people don't have never like even probably seen a situation or have know anybody in that situation, so they probably have no idea what the people in the trailer park would ever be going through,
hmm
and that disconnect can probably make a lot of people nervous when it comes to like possible eviction and them being behind on rent.
hmm
So I'm sure you won't get evicted
I mean, I probably won't be, but who knows?
though.
So
Like, I bought the building, but we're gonna tear it down, so you have to leave. That would be
or
horrible.
like carve up my studio apartment into like two other studio apartments, which
Yeah.
I mean, I can knock on wood, but it's possible. So, hey.
So yeah, that's just what it reminded me of,
Yeah.
that little situation, whole big situation.
hmm Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Did you have like other thoughts about this part of the book or about what we talked about today or
No, we've covered actually everything that like really kind of like stood
hmm
out to me as I was reading. Because again, I took notes. I'm really proud of myself in these sticky notes.
Nice.
Like it was like so much more effort, and I was just so proud of myself. But yeah, we've talked about everything that I had down in my little in my notes.
Cool. Neat. All right, cool. So yeah, so I guess we'll end our discussion there for today.
Okay.
Yeah, so for those who are watching, thanks so much for watching our discussion. We'll be back in a couple of weeks and we'll discuss the next part. So I guess that's chapters, what is that?
13, 14, 15, and 16.
Yep, cool. Awesome. Great. Awesome stuff.